Some traditions don't fade when people disappear. They linger, quietly, like footprints frozen into a lake long after the snow has stopped falling. I don't go to parties, I never really have. Even in college, the noise, the crowds, the forced excitement all felt hollow to me. I preferred silence, cold air, familiar faces. I grew up in a rural corner of northwestern Ontario, where winter isn't a season, it's a presence. And for as long as I can remember, New Year's Eve meant one thing: ice fishing. While everyone else counted down the seconds in crowded rooms, my father would load up his truck and head for a frozen lake with his brother, a few friends, and us kids bundled in layers too big for our bodies. My mother wasn't around much, and extended family was distant, so that frozen lake became our celebration. No fireworks, no music, just ice, darkness, and the quiet hum of wind moving across open water trapped beneath our feet. My dad is gone now. My brother moved to Chicago years ago, but every New Year's Eve I still feel pulled back to that tradition, like abandoning it would mean abandoning him too. That's why, a couple of years ago, I went ice fishing again. This time it was just me and my two closest friends, Nate and Trevor. The kind of guys who look more natural in flannel and boots than behind a desk. The kind who understand silence without needing to fill it. Spending New Year's Eve alone would have crushed me. This felt right. Nate drove. His truck was built for winter. Big tires, four-wheel drive, the kind of vehicle that makes you feel confident even when you probably shouldn't. We packed everything carefully: rods, bait, tip-ups, a sled, and a small pop-up shelter. The forecast said clear skies, but out here, weather lies as easily as people do. The lake wasn't marked on most maps. You had to know the back roads, the right turns through dense trees, the narrow trail that vanished under snowdrifts. That isolation was exactly why we loved it. The ice there stayed thick, solid, reliable. Or so we thought. As Nate drove deeper into the back roads, the world narrowed into headlights and snowbanks. No houses, no cell towers, just forest pressing in from all sides. I remember feeling that familiar calm settle into my chest, the same calm I used to feel as a kid standing on frozen water with my father nearby. That feeling shattered the moment we reached the trailhead. Someone was already there. He stood a short distance away from where Nate parked the truck, bundled in heavy winter gear. At first glance, he could have been anyone, another fisherman, maybe someone waiting for friends. But he wasn't moving, not shifting his weight, not stamping his feet against the cold, just staring at us. Then I noticed his phone. He kept looking down at it, then back at the truck, then down again, over and over, not texting, not scrolling, waiting. A chill crawled up my spine, and it had nothing to do with the temperature. I mentioned it to Nate and Trevor. Trevor shrugged it off, saying I was overthinking it. Nate watched the man carefully, but didn't say anything. We started unloading our gear anyway. That's when the man rushed toward us. He waved his arms wildly, breath fogging the air as he shouted that we needed to help him, said his buddy had fallen through the ice, said they'd just gotten the message. His voice cracked with panic, and fear, real or well performed, has a way of bypassing logic. Trevor didn't hesitate. He jumped out of the truck, and before I could fully process what was happening, we were all following the man down the trail toward the lake. We didn't grab our coats. We didn't grab our gear. We didn't ask questions. The trees swallowed us as we moved deeper toward the shoreline. My boots crunched loudly against the snow, each step echoing in the silence. The man stayed ahead of us, moving fast, too fast for someone supposedly desperate for help.
That's when I realized something was wrong. He wasn't leading us toward the usual fishing spots. He veered away from the areas where the ice was thickest toward a darker, more remote stretch of shoreline. The trees thinned, and the lake opened up before us, flat, black, and endless beneath the night sky. Then I saw them. two men stood near the edge of the ice. They weren't dressed for fishing. No rods, no sleds, no shelters, just dark winter clothing and stillness. They didn't look surprised to see us. They looked like they'd been waiting. I noticed their hands next. Both of them were holding guns. Time slowed in a way I can't properly explain. One of the men raised his weapon and told us to stop. His voice was calm, practiced, like he'd done this before. The man we'd followed turned around, a smile spreading across his face, slow, deliberate, and wrong. That was the moment I understood we hadn't stumbled into danger. We had been led into it. They demanded Nate's keys first, then our wallets, then our phones. There was no hesitation, no negotiation. Nate tossed the truck keys over without argument. Trevor and I emptied our pockets. I tried to keep my phone, but one of them noticed immediately and told me to drop it. Nate claimed his phone was still in the truck. They laughed. I felt anger boil up in my chest, hot and useless. If they hadn't been armed, I know Nate would have fought. I know I would have tried. But guns change the rules of reality. They make bravery irrelevant. One of the men walked us back up the trail at gunpoint. Another climbed into Nate's truck and started the engine. The headlights flared briefly, blinding, and then the vehicle disappeared down the road we'd just come from. The remaining men backed away into the trees, melting into the darkness like they'd never been there at all. When the silence returned, it was overwhelming. We stood there, shaking, not just from the cold. Nate's face was twisted with rage. Trevor looked hollow, like something had been scooped out of him. Then, Nate reached into his pocket. He pulled out his phone. He'd lied. Relief and disbelief crashed over me at the same time. We still had service, barely. Nate called the police, his voice tight as he explained what had happened. The dispatcher told us to stay where we were, so we waited. We huddled together on the trail, listening to the forest. Every snap of a branch made my heart jump. Nate kicked at the snow, cursing into the night. None of us could calm him down. The police eventually arrived, their lights slicing through the darkness like something unreal. They took our statements and drove us back to Trevor's house. Nate's truck was never found. The men were never identified. Sometimes we talk about it, quietly. Trevor thinks we were just unlucky, wrong place, wrong time. Maybe. But I can't stop thinking about that man at the trailhead, about how he was already there, about how he kept checking his phone like he was waiting for confirmation, waiting for us. And every New Year's Eve now, when the lakes freeze solid and the world grows quiet, I wonder how many other traditions ended out there on the ice, and how many traps are still waiting for someone to keep theirs alive.
There are nights that don't end when the sun comes up. They stay with you, quietly, waiting for moments of silence to resurface. For me, it's always the winter nights, the kind where the wind presses against the windows and the roads disappear under falling snow. That's when I remember what happened. That's when I remember him. It was New Year's Eve, a few years ago. I was driving alone to my parents' house in upstate Pennsylvania, several hours away. I left late in the afternoon, confident I'd beat the worst of the weather. I've always liked long drives, especially at night. There's something comforting about the isolation, the steady hum of the engine, the headlights carving a tunnel through the dark. That illusion didn't last long. About an hour into the drive, snow began to fall. At first, it was almost gentle. Soft flakes drifted lazily across the windshield, barely sticking. I remember smiling, thinking it made the night feel calm, cinematic even. That was my mistake. The farther I drove, the heavier it became. The flakes thickened, the sky vanished, and the road faded into a swirling wall of white. The night swallowed everything beyond my headlights. Within minutes, the calm turned violent. I was driving through a blizzard. The road grew slick. My tires slipped whenever the highway curved or climbed. My car, a small sedan, felt completely wrong for conditions like this. When the back end fishtailed on a slight incline, fear finally cut through my stubborn optimism. I pulled over onto the shoulder. There were no other cars, no lights, just wind, snow, and darkness stretching endlessly in both directions. I texted my parents, telling them what was happening. They were worried, so worried my dad immediately offered to come get me. I told him not to. The thought of someone else risking their life for me in that storm made my stomach twist. We agreed that if things didn't improve, I'd call for help. But the storm didn't ease. It worsened. Snow piled up around the car, creeping higher against the doors. The wind rocked the vehicle hard enough to make it groan. I shut the engine off, then back on again, trying to conserve gas while staying warm. Every minute felt longer than the last. That's when the loneliness set in, the kind that presses against your chest, the kind that makes the dark feel alive. I was staring into the storm when I saw headlights bloom in my rearview mirror. I've never felt relief like that. A snowplow emerged from the whiteout and pulled alongside my car, its massive blade hissing against the ice. I rolled down my window, cold air slicing into the warmth I'd been clinging to. The driver leaned out. He was older, late 50s, maybe older, with a face carved deep with lines. Not the soft kind you get from smiling. These were sharp, weathered grooves, like the road itself had etched them into his skin. A black knit cap sat low over his eyes. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared. Finally, he asked if I was okay. His voice was rough and gravelly, like it had been sanded down by years of cigarettes and cold nights. I told him my car couldn't handle the storm. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "wouldn't get far in a night like this." His eyes drifted past me, lingering on the back seat longer than necessary. Then he said, "I can give you a ride." Every instinct I had hesitated, but the wind slammed against my car, reminding me how exposed I was. I asked if he could take me to my parents' house. He said it was no problem and told me to leave the car. Something about the way he said "leave it" made my skin crawl. Still, I agreed. The cab of the snowplow was warm, almost uncomfortably so. The heat fogged the windows as I climbed in. At first, the comfort dulled my fear. I gave him directions. He nodded once. After that, he barely spoke. The road stretched on, swallowed by the storm. Minutes passed, then more. I started noticing that something felt wrong. The turns didn't match what I remembered. The familiar landmarks never came. I checked my phone. We were heading the wrong way. I asked him, carefully, if we were going the right direction. His posture changed instantly. His shoulders stiffened. Without looking at me, he said we were taking a detour, said the back roads were safer at night. At night, my stomach dropped. As we drove deeper into the storm, details I hadn't noticed before came into focus. Empty liquor bottles rolling near his feet, torn maps stuffed into the door pockets, a knife wedged tightly between the seats, its handle worn smooth. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break my ribs. The GPS kept recalculating, missed turn after missed turn. He never glanced at it. That's when I knew I wasn't being rescued. Through the blowing snow, I saw a single house ahead, its porch light faint but indistinctible. It stood alone, surrounded by nothing but darkness. It felt unreal, like a mirage. As we passed the driveway, something inside me snapped. I grabbed the door handle and kicked it open. The cold hit me like a punch. I slammed onto the frozen road, pain exploding through my leg, but adrenaline carried me forward. I ran, slipping, stumbling towards the house. I heard him shout behind me. I looked back once. He was reaching into the glove compartment. I didn't look again. I screamed as I pounded on the door. It flew open, and a man and woman pulled me inside without a word. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking so violently I couldn't speak. They called the police. By the time officers arrived, the snowplow was gone, vanished into the storm. They searched, but the weather erased everything. Tracks, tire marks, any proof he ever been there. I was driven safely to my parents' house, my abandoned car towed the next day. The police told me I was lucky. I don't feel lucky, because sometimes when the snow falls hard enough, I wonder how many other drivers saw headlights in their mirrors that night and trusted them. And I wonder if that snowplow is still out there, waiting for the next lonely road.
Some nights stay with you long after they've ended, not because of what you saw, but because of what you didn't. This happened on New Year's Eve in 2017. I was 20 at the time, exhausted, homesick, and counting the hours until the year was finally over. I grew up just outside Cleveland, Ohio, but I was attending college in upstate New York. Because of personal issues, I stayed on campus longer than everyone else, which meant Christmas passed quietly and alone. By the time New Year's Eve arrived, I just wanted to be home, somewhere familiar, somewhere safe. The flight itself was uneventful, but my mood was already ruined before I landed. I'm a lifelong Browns fan, and while I was sitting in the airport, they lost their final game of the season, finishing winless. It felt symbolic, like the year was making one last effort to disappoint me. To make things worse, my flight was delayed. That delay changed everything. My parents had originally planned for us to drive together to my cousin's house later that night for a small New Year's gathering. Because I arrived so late, they decided to leave ahead of me and took the main car. I was stuck with the older spare vehicle and a long drive through rural Ohio back roads, alone. Or at least, mostly alone. My mom insisted I take our golden retriever, Vera, with me. She said she'd keep me company. At the time, I didn't realize how much that decision mattered. By the time I got home from the airport, the night had fully settled in. I didn't even unpack. I tossed my bag into the back seat, helped Vera climb in, locked the house, and pulled out of the driveway. Ohio back roads at night feel endless. Just dark fields, leafless trees, and the occasional farmhouse light glowing like a distant island. There wasn't much snow, only a thin dusting that reflected my headlights just enough to make the darkness feel deeper. About halfway into the drive, Vera started whining. At first, I ignored it. Then she stood up. Then she began pacing. I sighed. I knew that behavior. I slowed down and pulled into the first clearing I could find. It was barely wide enough for the car, surrounded by trees on three sides. When I stepped out, the cold bit instantly through my jacket. The silence felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Vera jumped out happily, tail wagging, completely unbothered by the darkness. I didn't bother with the leash. She stayed close anyway, or so I thought. She wandered toward the tree line, sniffing around. Then the woods exploded with sound. Something crashed violently through the trees. Not the slow snap of a falling branch. This was fast, heavy, intentional, the kind of sound something large makes when it runs. My heart jumped into my throat. Before I could even call her name, Vera bolted straight into the woods. "Vera!" I shouted. Nothing. I yelled again. Still nothing. Panic took over. I couldn't leave her out there. I didn't think, I just ran. The forest swallowed me almost instantly. My phone flashlight barely cut through the darkness. The snow helped a little, reflecting light, but not enough. Branches scratched my arms. I nearly tripped multiple times, my lungs burning as I pushed forward. I don't know how long I ran before I had to stop. My chest felt like it was on fire. I leaned against a tree, gasping, suddenly aware of how stupid this was, how vulnerable I was. Vera stepped into the beam of my flashlight, moving slowly. Her tail tucked tight. Her body was shaking. She pressed herself against my legs like she was trying to disappear. I dropped down and hugged her, relief flooding through me. But it didn't last. Animals don't get scared like that for no reason. Something had frightened her. Something close. I stood up and whispered for her to stay with me. This time, she didn't wander. She glued herself to my side as we moved through the trees, trying to find the car. I had no sense of direction. Every tree looked the same. Then I heard it again. Heavy footsteps, too steady to be an animal. I didn't look back. I ran. Vera ran ahead, somehow knowing where to go. The sound followed, branches snapping, snow crunching, movement pacing us just out of sight. I've never felt fear like that before. Not the jump scare kind, the deep, paralyzing kind that tells you something is wrong. Suddenly, the trees opened up. The car. I shoved Vera inside, slammed the door, and jumped into the driver's seat. As I started the engine, I glanced toward the woods. 3 figures stood at the tree line. They didn't chase. They didn't wave. They just watched. I didn't wait to see more. I slammed the gas and sped off, heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. The road blurred beneath my headlights as I drove faster than I ever had before. A few miles later, Vera whimpered. I looked over and felt my stomach drop. She was bleeding. I pulled over immediately and found a deep cut just below her shoulder. It wasn't from branches. It was too clean, too precise. My hands shook as I grabbed the first aid kit from the trunk. I cleaned the wound and wrapped it as carefully as I could. She stayed still, trusting me completely. That hurt the most. The rest of the drive passed in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't slow down unless I had to. When I finally reached my cousin's house, I parked far from the road and sat there for a long time before going inside. Never told my parents. I never told my relatives. I didn't even tell my friends, because I don't know what I would say. I don't know who those people were or what would have happened if Vera hadn't run first. But every New Year's Eve, when the night grows quiet and the world feels still, I think about those woods, and I wonder if they were watching long before I ever stopped the car.